Welcome, the new video. In this recap, a deadly swamp hides a secret monster. When fishermen start vanishing and bodies pile up, one man uncovers a nightmare far worse than anyone imagined. In this starting, at the end of World War II, in 1944, in Poland, Eric was separated from his parents. While being dragged away by guards, the boy awakens his supernatural abilities and causes the metal gate to bend at his will. Upon realizing he is facing a mutant, one of the guards strikes him with his weapon, and Eric passes out. When he wakes up, the boy is taken to Dr. Sebastian Shaw's office, who tries to convince him to use his ability to move a coin, but after a few attempts, Eric claims he is unable to do so. At that moment, the scientist decides to test a new method to awaken the teenager's powers, and orders the guards to bring his mother into the room. Sebastian's goal is to use the woman as leverage to force Eric to reveal his powers, and when the boy fails for the second time, the doctor pulls the trigger. Upon witnessing his mother's horrific death, Eric is consumed by his own rage, and his powers begin to manifest uncontrollably. Suddenly, he begins destroying all the metal objects in the room, including the soldiers' helmets, crushing their skulls. Witnessing the full manifestation of that boy's powers, Sebastian is impressed and smiles with enthusiasm, for he has just discovered the catalyst for Eric's powers. That same year, in New York, a boy from a wealthy family living in a large mansion wakes up in the middle of the night and grabs a baseball bat to protect his home, convinced that there is an intruder inside. When Charles Xavier arrives in the kitchen, he finds his mother rummaging through the refrigerator, but he soon realizes that something is wrong with her. Thanks to his psychic powers, the boy manages to enter the imposter's mind and forces her to reveal her true identity. That night, Charles meets Raven and is overjoyed to discover that there are other people around the world who also possess special abilities. From that day on, Charles convinces his parents to raise Raven as if she were his sister, and almost 2 decades later, in 1962, the young woman begins to feel bad about having to hide her true appearance from other humans. During an investigation of a group of mobsters, Moira McTaggart sees Colonel Hendry entering the Hellfire nightclub and disguises herself to follow him. When she finally manages to find the meeting room, the woman realizes that the colonel is negotiating with a criminal, and she remains hidden so she can listen to the conversation. Realizing that the colonel is unwilling to cooperate with his plans, Sebastian orders his henchmen to use his powers to intimidate him, and Hendry is thrown against the wall. At that moment, the colonel discovers that even the woman accompanying him is a mutant and also works for his enemy. After convincing Hendry to follow his orders, Sebastian calls Azazel to take him to Washington so that he can encourage the general to launch missiles at Turkey. In an attempt to get answers about what she saw in that room, Moira seeks out Charles Xavier, a renowned genetics professor at Columbia University, and asks him about the possibility of mutations that grant superpowers to humans. While delving into the woman's mind, Charles realizes she has had contact with other mutants and expresses an interest in working with her. A week after meeting Charles, Moira manages to schedule a meeting with the CIA director to explain what she saw at the Hellfire nightclub. Knowing that Mr. McComb would never believe her, the woman brings the geneticist to prove the possibility of her theory. And during the meeting, Raven uses her powers to show the principal that her foster brother's work is reliable. After watching that incredible performance, Fred volunteers to keep an eye on Raven and Charles. Otherwise, they would both be arrested until the CIA decided what to do with them. Years after escaping German soldiers, Eric embarks on a journey of revenge, arriving in Argentina with the goal of finding Sebastian Shaw. During the search, Eric makes a stop at a bar and comes across a photo of the man who killed his mother hanging on the wall. Seated at the table behind him are 2 retired German soldiers who had the misfortune of crossing paths with a vengeful mutant, a victim of experiments conducted in concentration camps. Even after claiming they were only following orders from their superiors, the 2 men end up being eliminated along with the owner of that establishment. After getting what he wanted, Sebastian meets with the colonel on his private boat, and after making sure that he hasn't told anyone about the deal, the man prepares to eliminate him. As he anticipated his enemy would try to get rid of him, Hendry carries a grenade and threatens to pull the pin. At that moment, Sebastian approaches and takes the explosive from the soldier's hands so that he himself can detonate the bomb. As soon as the explosion begins, the scientist manages to contain it with his bare hands, and Hendry discovers that he, too, is a mutant. Sebastian's ability consists of absorbing energy, which helps him stay young and allows him to disintegrate any object he touches. As night falls, the German doctor is surprised by Eric's sudden appearance and is happy to see him. But Emma Frost quickly realizes that he came there with the intention of eliminating Sebastian, and acts swiftly to protect her boss. At that moment, the American Coast Guard appears, and Emma identifies that the soldiers are accompanied by a telepath, so she uses her abilities to block Charles's powers. Next, Janos Quested sends his cyclones to sink the smaller boats that are approaching, buying time for his team to escape. After returning to the surface, Eric sends Sebastian's yacht's anchor after him and uses the current to cut the vessel in half, but the scientist manages to escape in a submarine. In an attempt to complete his mission, Eric uses his powers to sink the submarine, but this requires a great deal of effort. Realizing that the man is about to drown, Charles jumps into the water and pulls him back to the surface, allowing Sebastian to escape. The next day, Eric agrees to be taken to the CIA's secret research base, with the promise that those guys will help him find Sebastian again. After being introduced to researcher Hank McCoy, Charles discovers that he too is a mutant, and unintentionally ends up revealing this to Fred. Throughout his time working for the CIA, the young man kept his powers a secret, but knowing that there are others like him there makes him comfortable revealing his abilities. Quickly, the boy takes off his shoes and shows his enormous feet, which allow him to hang upside down. In addition to exhibiting genetic modifications to his body, Hank also proves to be a brilliant scientist, as he was able to convert a radar installation into a transmitter designed to amplify brainwaves. After connecting to the transmitter, Charles's brain capacity expands and he is able to use his telepathic gifts to locate other mutants scattered around the world. Among them is a young woman named Angel, who works at a nightclub and readily agrees to join Charles and Eric when she discovers they are gathering a group of people like her. That same week, Alex, Darwin, and Sean are recruited, and initial contact is made with Logan, but he shows no interest in hearing any proposals. When the team first meets, Raven takes the form of Sean, then asks everyone to introduce themselves and show off their skills. At that moment, Darwin stands up and puts his head inside an aquarium. Instantly, the man acquires gills, as his powers give him the ability to adapt to any environment. Next up is Sean, who decides to adopt the codename Banshee due to his ability to generate extremely powerful sound waves. Soon after, Angel stands up and shows her wings. In addition to flying, the young woman is also able to launch fireballs from her mouth, which makes her even more powerful. When questioned about his powers, Alex is reluctant to give a demonstration, as he doesn't yet have much control over his abilities, but eventually gives in to his colleagues' insistence. After asking them to step aside, the boy unleashes a wave of cosmic energy capable of cutting a solid metal statue in half, and is named Havoc. That night, the young people throw a party to celebrate the formation of the team, and end up getting a scolding from Moira and Charles, who went there to warn them about their first mission. The following morning, the group disguises themselves to form a military troop, and they are transported in the back of a truck to the home of a high-ranking Soviet officer, as the CIA has discovered that Sebastian Shaw has a scheduled meeting with him. During the journey, the vehicle they are in is stopped by Russian soldiers who decide to search the vehicle, so when the rear doors open, Charles uses his powers to make the entire team invisible to their enemies. When they arrive at their final destination, the mutants spot Emma Frost and realize that she is not accompanied by Sebastian. Therefore, Charles devises a strategy to investigate her unnoticed, and invades the mind of one of the soldiers who is taking care of security at the location. Even after discovering that Sebastian sent Emma to the meeting in his place, Eric decides to act, as he plans to capture the woman to find out the whereabouts of his enemy. After using the barbed wire fences to capture the guards blocking his path, Eric runs towards the house, and before entering, eliminates 2 more soldiers who appear in front of him. In an attempt to prevent his friend from making an irreversible mistake, Charles goes after him and they both break into the Soviet general's room. At that moment, the fantasy that Emma had created in General Army Volkov's mind is interrupted, and he realizes he was being deceived by the woman. Furious, the officer draws his weapon to eliminate the intruders, but Charles puts him to sleep. Upon realizing she is surrounded, Emma assumes her diamond form so that the telepath cannot invade her mind. Eric then decides to use brute force to capture the woman and force her to reveal what she knows. When she realizes that Eric is truly willing to eliminate her to discover Sebastian's location, Emma reverts to her human form and allows Charles to search her mind. After discovering his enemy's whereabouts and his sinister plans to take control of the planet, Charles decides to take Emma prisoner to be interrogated by the CIA, as the situation is even worse than he could have imagined. The following night, when all the mutants are back at the base, Fred hears a loud noise coming from outside, and doesn't even notice when his partner is captured by Azazel. Immediately afterward, the red monster returns to retrieve him, and Fred suffers a fatal fall, as do several other agents who were on duty. Once the security guards are eliminated, Sebastian infiltrates the base using a special helmet capable of blocking any attempt to access his mind. At that moment, a new team of security guards gathers around him and begins shooting. But Sebastian survives even a bazooka shot and absorbs all the energy from the projectiles to return the attack with a single explosion. When Raven and the other young people realize that humans will not be able to stop the invaders, they decide to flee. But they cannot find a safe escape route, as Azazel is eliminating everyone who crosses his path. Meanwhile, Janos sends one of his cyclones to destroy the transmitter built by Hank, and his entire team becomes hostage to Sebastian's henchmen. However, instead of hurting them, the man tries to recruit them for his team. But Angel is the only one who agrees to join him. When Sebastian is about to leave, Darwin decides to join him, but it's all a plan to save Angel. As he approaches the young woman, Darwin transforms his body into a shield to protect her, and gives the signal for Alex to act. However, when the boy unleashes his destructive energy wave, Sebastian uses his powers to contain the attack, transforming the explosion into an energy sphere that explodes Darwin's body from the inside out. After recruiting a new member for his team, Sebastian travels to Moscow to speak with General Army Volkov and try to convince him to launch missiles at the United States in response to the latest attack. However, the Russian officer is unwilling to do anything that could start a war, so Sebastian calls in his henchmen to intimidate him. When he finally reunites with his sister, Charles runs to hug her and laments not having been present when the base was attacked. Realizing that the young people are in danger, the professor decides to train them so that they can make the most of their powers and use them to protect themselves and others. To ensure everyone's safety during training, Charles decides to take them to his family's old mansion, as Sebastian is unaware of its existence. While Professor Xavier prepares his team for what is to come, tensions between Russia and the United States escalate, and the media begins to speculate about the possibility of nuclear war. In an attempt to help Alex learn to control his powers, Charles decides to take him to the gate, where the shelter his stepfather built to protect his family from nuclear bombs is located. For the first time, the boy finds himself in a place capable of containing his powers and feels confident enough to further develop his cosmic energy attacks. To make Alex's shots even more accurate, Hank builds a device capable of focusing all the energy he produces onto a single target. As for Sean, his biggest challenge is learning to use his sound waves to take flight, but with the help of a glider developed by Hank, the boy manages to overcome this limitation. After leaping from the top of a transmission tower, Sean opens his arms, and his supersonic screams prevent him from crashing to the ground. Thanks to his giant feet, which resemble a pair of hands, the young scientist can run faster than any other human. But that's not enough to make him feel comfortable with his appearance. Despite being extremely skilled, Eric faces great difficulty in accessing his powers, so Charles helps him access his positive emotions, as he believes that all the pain and anger his friend carries are hindering his evolution. After accessing a happy memory with his late mother, Eric becomes able to move a gigantic antenna on his own, and feels more powerful than ever. That night, after conducting several studies with the blood samples he collected from Raven, Hank appears in the young woman's room with a serum that supposedly serves to attack the cells that cause the physical mutation in both of them. According to him, that substance will not affect Raven's abilities, only her appearance, but the young woman is not willing to erase part of who she is, and decides that from now on she will no longer try to hide her true form. So, in a desperate attempt to be accepted as a normal person, Hank decides to use the serum alone, and returns to his room before applying the substance to his own foot. Immediately after emptying the syringe, Hank sees that part of his body change, but soon after he begins to grow in size, reaching even larger proportions than before. Within seconds, all parts of Hank's body begin to grow, and his entire skin becomes covered in blue fur. The following morning, upon entering the laboratory, Charles finds a note from Hank stating that he went to the airbase and discovers the place completely destroyed. After donning their special suits, Professor Xavier and his team of mutants go to meet Hank, and are surprised to discover that the serum he developed has further enhanced the mutant traits in his gene pool. From that moment on, the young man adopts the codename Beast, and asks his friends to get on the plane so he can take them to the Atlantic Ocean, where the American army is ready to prevent the Russian ship approaching Florida from crossing. When one of the Russian ships was about to cross the line marking American territory, superiors contacted the commander to ask them to turn back, but the ship continued on its course. At that moment, Charles decides to investigate what is happening inside, and discovers that Azazel eliminated all the Russian soldiers to prevent them from refusing. So, to prevent a Third World War, the professor invades the mind of the Russian commander on the neighboring ship and forces him to bomb the vessel that was boarded by Sebastian's henchmen. After locating his greatest enemy, Charles enlists the help of his team to capture him, as Sebastian and his gang are in a submarine several meters deep. While diving into the ocean, Sean uses his sound waves like sonar to detect the exact location of Sebastian Shaw's submarine. Next, he relays the information to Eric, who hangs onto the aircraft's wheels and uses his powers to bring the submarine out of the water. Upon seeing that vessel weighing tons floating before their eyes, all the soldiers, both Russian and American, are astonished, and at that moment, the existence of the mutants is revealed to the world. When he realizes he will have to face other mutants, Sebastian prepares for battle and absorbs as much energy as possible from the reactor. Meanwhile, Janos exits the submarine and sends a cyclone to shoot down his enemy's aircraft. At that moment, Eric loses control of his powers, and the submarine is thrown onto the beach. After being hit by the hurricane, Hank loses control of the plane, and his team suffers a serious accident. Despite the fall, all the mutants manage to survive without major injuries and go out to face their adversaries. Seeing Janos preparing to send another of his cyclones, Alex attacks him and ends up being dragged into the sky along with Hank. Azazel's plan was to release them from up there, but Beast locks his claws onto him, forcing the monster to take him back to the ground. While Sean tries to stop Angel from attacking the American fleet, Eric invades the submarine in search of Sebastian and is shocked to discover that he has turned his own body into an atomic bomb. At that moment, the scientist uses some of the energy he absorbed to attack his opponent and states that all the experiments he performed on him during his adolescence were for his own good, because it was thanks to them that Eric was able to awaken his powers. Furious, the man tries to strike Sebastian's body with the metal covering the walls of that room, but ends up being trapped by him. While the demented man tries to convince his guinea pig to join his group of mercenaries, Eric takes the opportunity to remove his helmet, allowing Charles to invade his mind. Even from a distance, the professor manages to immobilize Sebastian's body, but Eric decides to put on the helmet to become invulnerable to his friend's powers. Therefore, Charles is unable to stop him from piercing the brain of the man who eliminated his mother using the same coin that Sebastian gave him on the day they met. After eliminating his greatest enemy, Eric displays his body as a trophy, so that Azazel and the others know they lost that battle. Next, the man, whose codename is Magneto, tries to convince all mutants to join him in fighting against humans, claiming that they are the true enemies. Believing Sebastian is still alive, the commander of the American fleet sends dozens of missiles toward the island, and Eric uses his powers to stop the attack of all the projectiles at once. Soon after, he sends the bombs back to the ships with the aim of eliminating all the soldiers, but is stopped by Charles. When the professor manages to take him down, some bombs fall into the sea, but Magneto manages to keep several of them on course. Just as the ships were about to be destroyed, Moira appears and shoots at Eric, but he deflects all the bullets. While trying to protect himself from the gunfire, Magneto accidentally causes one of the bullets to hit Charles in the spine, and then realizes the gravity of his actions. Immediately, the mutant runs to help his friend, and all the other missiles that were to be used to destroy the ships explode in midair. After making sure that Charles doesn't agree with separating humans and mutants, Eric decides to leave and convinces Raven and the mercenaries to join him. At that moment, the young woman bids farewell to her foster brother, and Charles does not object to her departure, as he knows that this is the only way for Raven to never have to hide again. As soon as their enemies disappear, Beast and the others gather around the professor to help him to his feet, only to discover that he has lost the use of his legs. Weeks after his team prevented the start of a Third World War, Charles decides to officially transform his family mansion into a home for young mutants. During their farewell, he erases Moira's memories to avoid the risk of her revealing his location during a possible interrogation, as this is the only way to guarantee his anonymity. After discovering the exact location where Emma is being held, Magneto storms the cell and frees her from prison so she can join his team. Subscribe for more recap videos.